As our mini renovation of the tiny house continued, we finished painting, the flooring was in, and now we needed to work on the bathroom. The project for this weekend is the bathroom. So we pulled out the pedestal sink. We went to Home Depot today and found a small vanity that will actually fit into our tiny little bathroom. Like barely. Remains to be seen if the door is going to close properly, but it should. If our measurements are right, it should. The kitchen counter has been refinished. We got the metal in front of the wood stove, which is working out great. We've had the wood stove on maybe 3 times so far. And now I'm going around and I'm retouching the trim because when I was sanding the counters, I hit it a couple times with the sander and scuffed it up. So I'm going to put a new coat of paint on that and then put some caulk around the outside because this is just an area that tends to get wet and I don't want anything to get behind the kitchen cabinets. So Pat is on his second trip of the day to Home Depot because we need to cut out a little piece on the bottom there and we need one of those circular drill bits. So he went to go get that. And then we're gonna try to put the sink together and have our bathroom back, which will be really nice because we haven't had a bathroom sink in about a week. And you know, we make it work, but it'll definitely be nice to have it back. The other situation we had to address in the bathroom was where the drywall got wet on either side of the shower. We pulled the drywall out and we found these plastic panels at Home Depot and they were the perfect thing to go right next to the shower, much more durable and able to take a little bit of water. The original pedestal sink fit the space, but it didn't leave us any countertop and it didn't leave us any storage space. So this switch was really meant to utilize the space more effectively and to give us somewhere to put things, having this cabinet underneath. The good news was the door was able to swing open and close, but it doesn't leave much space, so you have to kind of work around the door. But we were happy with this and we turned our attention to the next project, which was figuring out a better seating system instead of the couch that we have. This love seat we got at IKEA the week after the tiny house was delivered because it was the only couch that would fit into this space. But there's still a lot of wasted room on the sides that we weren't happy with, and it gets a little crowded with Redford on there. But the biggest thing was when I teach yoga, and now I've been teaching yoga from the house a lot more frequently, teaching virtually and recording videos, I don't have any room to set up my mat. So we decided that getting rid of a permanent couch, which you can see takes up so much room, we really can't move it anywhere, and replacing it with a floor seating system that we can take apart and rearrange would be a lot more efficient for our needs right now. Okay, now that I got everything moved and I threw all the cushions over there, these are the ones that I have to work with. Now it's a matter of making some sort of order out of all these cushions and seeing if we can create a comfortable seating system that's going to be more flexible and let us make better use of this space because the couch has just never really fit the way that I wanted it to. So this is all very much an experiment and we're going to try it out for at least a little while before we get rid of the couch because I want to be 100% sure that we're going to be able to be comfortable. That's super important. You might recognize these cushions from the Scamp. These are the foam cushions that I took out of the dinette cushions and the mattress that we were sleeping on that I replaced. When I replaced the bed in the Scamp, I knew I was going to save these for this project. And it kind of shows you how we have been using the Scamp and the tiny house together to feed off of each other. And I'm happy that I get to reuse these so we don't have to throw them out. After some moving around and rearranging with the cushions, I'll show you what I got. It's actually pretty comfortable. I am fairly happy with this. I put the couch cushions along the back and on the sides. The bottom is mostly the Scamp cushions, and then we had a mattress topper on our old king-size mattress that we cut up and put into the Scamp. And then I put our little IKEA storage cubes on either side so we have a place to put things. And yeah, I feel like it works pretty well. When Pat gets home, he and the dog are going to test it out and see if it's a keeper. And we'll make the decision of whether or not to officially get rid of the love seat and try this out for a while. I think it's actually going to work well because we can rearrange it. It can be a couch. It can be like a bed if we ever have company. I think Redford's going to like it. And it just gives us more space from side to side and makes the space more flexible because it's so much easier to move. Because you see, the couch is just very difficult to move anywhere in this space, so it'll be nice when this is all open. After a couple days of trial and error, we came up with our final design for the cushions, which was actually a little bit smaller and used fewer cushions so that it was easier for me to take it apart and put it back together. But Redford definitely approved. He actually loves the floor couch, and Pat was happy with it, so we decided to get rid of the love seat and stick with the floor couch. But let me take it apart so that I can show you why this actually helps us to function better in this space.
Sit, bub. Hey, sit. Thank you. Okay. If you're trying to figure out why we got rid of our couch, I know it's a strange thing. Oh, you sleepy? It's really about us adapting the tiny house to our current needs. Almost 6 years after we made the move into this small space, a lot of things have changed. And a big part of that was the pandemic. I've been a yoga teacher for over 15 years, and I've always taught in a studio and all sorts of different locations in person. And then when the pandemic came and I couldn't teach yoga in the public, I had this stance of, okay, I'm just not going to teach yoga for a while. I'll take a break. And when the pandemic is done, I'll go back to teaching my regular classes. And after a few months, I realized that that was just not... The landscape of teaching yoga is pretty different now. So I had to adapt and start teaching online and teaching through Zoom, and that meant working from home. And in a tiny house, that was really never the plan. I never envisioned myself working and teaching from home. And all of a sudden I was trying to figure out, well, where can I put my yoga mat that gives me a good angle that I can film? And that's not an easy thing because the camera has to be pretty far away from me in order to get a picture of my whole body. And I need it to not be a really cluttered area, which is hard. We have a lot of stuff in our house, so there's not a lot of good angles for filming. And after thinking about it for a while, we decided that if we got rid of the couch, I would have this whole space where I can actually put my mat out. And it's still a little bit tricky because I have to move everything to the other side of the room. But for right now, with the space that we have, so that I can keep moving my business and my career of teaching yoga forward, this is the option that we're going to work with.
The last change that we needed to make to the tiny house before winter was the cap on our chimney. And this was a critical change to our wood stove. I bought the wood stove in 2017, shortly after we moved into the tiny house. And at that point, there were fewer options in terms of wood stove setups that would work in a tiny house. So the fittings that I had to buy were for a Dickinson marine stove. The old cap was very restrictive because it was meant to be used on a boat. And it meant that we had to clean the wood stove about every 2 weeks, which was a lot. Patrick had a theory that if we changed the cap and got better airflow, that we wouldn't get as much creosote buildup and the stove would be more efficient. And he was completely right. When we switched the cap, and he actually opened up the mesh even more so that the airflow was not restricted and the creosote didn't build up in the cap as much, it made a world of difference with the wood stove. We're now able to go a month to maybe a month and a half in between having to clean it The stove is a lot more efficient, it's easier to get it started, and we've been using it more because of that. This winter, we used the wood stove pretty much every day when we were home, and it made such a big difference because this was a cold and snowy winter. The wood stove made it actually a little bit enjoyable to be home, and it made the tiny house so warm and cozy. Very happy with that little switch of putting the new cap on. So now the big question is, what is next for the tiny house? And there are still some things that need to be worked on, right? That's a never-ending process with pretty much any house. The overhead lights in the kitchen area are still not working. We haven't had the energy or the effort to figure that out yet. So that's a future project. But really, there's two major things that we want to do with the tiny house in the future. The first one that we've been working on for quite a few years now is figuring out where we're going to get property to park the tiny house. As of right now, we have been renting a lot for almost 6 years exactly now. And throughout the past several years, we have been looking pretty intensely to try to find a place that we can park the tiny house on our own property so that we don't have to rent the lot. And making a long story short, we figured out that it's impossible in New Jersey. There's no loophole, there's no way that we can work it to legally live in a tiny house on our own property in the state of New Jersey. The other factor is that property taxes in New Jersey are the highest in the country, the highest out of all 50 states. So to have any sort of acreage would be unaffordable to us, and we're looking for a lifestyle that is affordable so that we can keep traveling and we can keep expanding our careers rather than working as much as we need to just to pay taxes and to support a high cost of living. That's very opposite of what we're trying to do with the tiny house. So New Jersey is just not going to work. They won't let us live the lifestyle that we want to live here. So we have to start looking at other states, and that's the big project for 2022. We want to figure out where is that place that we're going to be able to live the lifestyle that we want to live, where we can have some property and we can grow some of our own food and have a garden, maybe have a fenced area for Redford to run around, all of those things that we would love to do with our own piece of dirt to have the tiny house on. At that point, there are also some other additions that we are planning, like a sunroom on the front of the tiny house. If we could put a sunroom out there, it would double the indoor space that we have. And at the beginning of this process, when we moved into the tiny house, it was a different world that we lived in 2016. The idea behind the tiny house movement was that we utilized our space outside of the tiny house as much as possible. You go to the gym, you're at work, you're doing a lot of different things, and then the pandemic happened and we spent more time indoors than we have in our entire lives in our house. And with the small square footage of the space, that was especially difficult, and that's when we really started thinking about, okay, we need to put the tiny house on a piece of property, we need to put a big sunroom on the front of the tiny house, and that will give me space to work, it will give me space to teach yoga from home, and we'll just be able to stretch out a little bit more so that if one of us is doing something, we don't get in the other person's way quite as much. So that is the long-term plan, and we're hoping to get some of that plan in motion this year within 2022. So we will keep you updated on the progress of moving in that direction.
Well, you worried about you and me, the injustice, the next president to be, the news and what you hear, your career. It's time for you to face those fears, and it's all fair to be aware, and I'll be there, so don't be scared. Just take a deep breath of air, and 1, 2, 3 to 10, you begin to focus again, and though time flies, we'll have enough to realize this bigger than the both of us.